Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and the Ubisoft situation may be worse than we think. Maybe you've been following the recent Ubisoft news, maybe you've heard some mention of it, but you're out of the loop. We'll give a full breakdown on how Ubisoft may just be one bad game away from total collapse. We'll also talk about the latest Diablo 4 news, including a bombshell from Jason Schreier's new book about who Mike Morhaime tried to convince to lead Diablo 4 back in 2016. Now, before we move on, just a quick word from this video's sponsor, Incogni. You ever wonder how you get spam calls, texts, and emails? It's because thousands of companies are collecting, aggregating, and trading your personal data, and it's all legal. However, you have the right to demand that a data broker deletes whatever personal info they may have about you. The thing is, it's pretty tough to track down and contact all the companies to make that request. And that's where Incogni comes in. It's a service that does all of that for you. It reaches out to data brokers on your behalf, requests that your data be removed, and deals with any pushback they may give. And you'd be surprised at how much of your personal info may be out there. Not just your name, email, and phone number, but also things like your employment history, your home address, your relatives, maybe even your social security number. Here's my dashboard. You can see that I've got 4 requests left in progress and 62 have been completed. I've been using Incogni for over a year now, after I'd started getting a lot of spam texts. And I don't know what started it all. Maybe I signed up for some store's loyalty card, maybe because of a big data breach. LinkedIn, for instance, has repeatedly had data of hundreds of millions of its users scraped and sold on the dark web. But I know after using Incogni, all that spam died down significantly. So take back your data, stop the spam, go to incogni.com/Rhykker and use code Rhykker to get an exclusive offer for 60% off. That's incogni.com/RHYKKER, or click the link below to take your personal data off the market. All right, we're going to kick things off with the big Ubisoft story of the week, which is just, what's going wrong at Ubisoft, man? They've delayed their next game, Assassin's Creed Shadows, from November 12th to February 14th, 2025, pushing it past that sweet fourth quarter of the year revenue window with all that holiday money. Plus, their executive committee is launching an internal review on how they can just be better. And following this news, Ubisoft share prices dropped about 20% over the span of like a day. And they weren't doing great to begin with. At the end of August, their share price was 17.19 euros. Then Star Wars Outlaws released and the stock has been a tumbling down. And as of today, they've lost about 40% of their stock's value over the past month. But 1 year ago, stock was trading at nearly 30 euros. That's a staggering 65% drop in value in 1 year. Now, if we go back even further, at the height of the pandemic, January to February 2021, Ubisoft stock was trading at 84.6 euros. We've dropped 87% since then. Its highest value ever was in the summer of 2018, when it was trading at 103 euros. We're down to 10.48. These are numbers that Ubisoft was trading at a decade ago. And when you factor in inflation, since 10.48 euros was worth a lot more money 10 years ago, the picture being painted is even grimmer. The stock saw a gradual rise from 2012 to its peak in 2018. Nice growth over time there. But since then, nearly a decade of growth has been eliminated, just wiped away, with no indication that the stock is going to stop plummeting. If I were a Ubisoft shareholder, I'd be thinking, how have you messed up so bad? Ubisoft owns major franchises like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, the Tom Clancy games, Prince of Persia. Hell, they even had Hollywood movies made out of Assassin's Creed and Prince of Persia. These are big, known, reputable brands. These IPs hold value. Now they even got to make a Star Wars game, and that Star Wars game made their stock tumble. So now, why delay their next game out of an optimal revenue-driving release window? Well, in their company financial statement and update this week, they revised their financial targets after sales of Star Wars Outlaws proved to be, quote, softer than expected. Let's cut through the business talk here. If Outlaws had sold close to expectations, they'd be saying something like that. softer than expected is corporate speak to shareholders for it sold a lot less than expected, but please don't panic and tank our stock. From past statements, Ubisoft was expecting a really strong Q4 carried by Outlaws and Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now they're saying that Outlaws did not sell well and they're pushing Shadows completely out of Q4. This is a serious move. And to me, it feels like a Hail Mary play. I think just about every Assassin's Creed game has released in Q4. This is a huge break from tradition. Assassin's Creed Shadows may be Ubisoft's last chance at this point. They're one final blunder away from having to start selling off major assets like franchises or even the company as a whole. They also announced that Assassin's Creed Shadows will launch on day one on Steam. Yep, they've come crawling back to the Steam store after a few years of only being on the Epic Games launcher and criticizing Steam for taking an aggressive 30% cut of profits versus Epic's 12%. Well, I guess their accountants told them that 12% of zero is still zero, and maybe it's better to move more copies at less profit per copy in the world's most popular game store than to make a few more dollars per copy in a store that, according to some indie devs, moves 50 times fewer units. And it's not just Assassin's Creed Shadows. They said all of their games will now also come to Steam on day one, and Star Wars Outlaws will come to Steam on November 21st. But again, why delay Assassin's Creed Shadows? Well, earlier in the week, news broke that Ubisoft was canceling press previews for the game, which started to spark alarm because generally you only withhold press copies if you think your game will review poorly and therefore get bad publicity before launch. Ubisoft also canceled its online appearance at the Tokyo Game Show due to, quote, various circumstances. So announcing the delay at least quelled concerns that they were going to release the game and not give out advanced review copies, but it raised other concerns instead. Why delay a game, especially so close to release? Well, in their statement, Ubisoft said that Shadows was, quote, feature complete, but that, quote, learnings from the Star Wars Outlaws release led us to provide additional time to further polish the title. So they learned that you should release a game once it's polished and not before. You know, guys, I think I have what it takes to be a video game executive. All these really brilliant ideas about, you know, making a good game and releasing it once it's ready. These ideas just come to me naturally. I don't know. I think I'm just some super genius. Ubisoft also dropped such nuggets of wisdom as, quote, our second quarter performance fell short of our expectations, prompting us to address this swiftly and firmly with an even greater focus on a player-centric, gameplay-first approach and an unwavering commitment to the long-term value of our brands. They will also be departing from the traditional season pass model and, quote, all players will be able to enjoy the game at the same time on February 14th, and those who pre-order the game will be granted the first expansion for free. I mean, I joke here, but these are all good things. Even if most of them should be granted, these are all good things, good decisions, a good move for the company and its games. It's unfortunate that it's taking near catastrophe for them to come to this realization. But altogether, if Ubisoft is really embracing these changes in ethos moving forward, then I think it's safe as gamers to feel optimistic about the future of Ubisoft games. I mean, Ubisoft games are generally not bad. They're just aggressively mediocre, oftentimes, right? You know, Star Wars Outlaws got a 76 out of 100 Metacritic rating. They don't generally release trash games, but they also aren't generally releasing Game of the Year candidates. The thing is, we've reached a point where the market is so saturated with games. I mean, we have more games than we can ever play. How many of you have a Steam library of games that you have not played and probably will never play 75% of those titles? So gamers just don't want to spend $70 on a mediocre game. They either wait for a big discount or they just forget about the game entirely because by the time it comes on sale, 10 more games have released at that point. And here's the issue with pushing Shadows back to February. You know what else is releasing February 2025? Avowed, Civilization 7, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, Monster Hunter Wilds, it's a loaded month filled with a lot of hyped games. They may as well at this point push it back even further to avoid these big titles if they could even afford to. Ubisoft also said that, quote, in light of recent challenges, oh, you know, like the stock being in the absolute gutter? Yeah, that kind of challenge. The executive committee is launching a review under the supervision of the board of directors, quote, aimed at further improving our execution, notably in this player-centric approach, and accelerating our strategic path towards a higher performing model to the benefit of our stakeholders and shareholders. It would not surprise me if we see some shakeups in management at Ubisoft as a result of this, maybe even some redundancies. And if I worked at Ubisoft, I'll be brushing up my resume and making friends with people who work at other studios, because if Ubisoft gets sold, someone's going to come in and execute some mass layoffs. And that's if Ubisoft doesn't do it themselves, because they need to slash budget to maintain profitability. All right, moving on to some Diablo 4 news. We got word that the next campfire chat is taking place on Wednesday, October 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern. 3 topics will be covered. First, they'll go over changes that are being made based on PTR feedback of the big 2.0 patch. Next, they'll go over everything coming to the new season. And lastly, they'll discuss the new features in Vessel of Hatred that they haven't expanded upon much, including the Spiritborn class, mercenaries, the Dark Citadel, and the Kurast Undercity. We also got this week 2 new videos. One was a Vessel of Hatred gameplay launch trailer, which shows what appears to be a pretty sick-looking boss fight, as well as a lore video about Akarat, and we can imagine that he'll play a significant role in the story. We also got clarification that Stygian stones are going away in 2.0. They will no longer be needed to summon tormented bosses. Now you simply select a difficulty setting and the boss will be equivalent to that setting. So for any Eternal players, your Stygian stones will be converted into, quote, a significant amount of gold. And lastly, for Diablo news, Season 10 of Project Diablo 2 will be launching on October 25th. Project Diablo 2 is a D2 mod. You need to have the original game, not D2 Resurrected, original D2. And what this mod does is it basically includes a bunch of balance changes to make more builds viable, some great quality of life improvements. It has an endgame mapping system similar to Path of Exile. There's a bunch of challenging bosses added, there's a crafting system, and a whole lot more. Oh, also Season 33 of Diablo 3 starts on the same day. Theme for that season is the old Shadow Clone theme coming back, plus the 4th Kanai Cube slot. Then in other news, journalist Jason Schreier is releasing his new book, Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment on October 8th. And I got an early review copy, and I devoured it, took a bunch of notes in here as well. If you are a Blizzard fan, or if you were a Blizzard fan and still care to know about Blizzard, I recommend this book. It's probably my favorite nonfiction book at this point. It's an unbiased look at Blizzard's history, from its founding to its growing pains to where we are today and how we got here. This is not a hit piece, just attacking Blizzard. It covers the good, it covers the bad, it just reveals the truth, warts, and all. I saw some people thinking that this is a book by Blizzard. This is not by Blizzard, no. If Blizzard wrote a biography about itself, it would not include a lot of what's in here. If you're someone who has followed Blizzard stories over the years, there aren't going to be a ton of big bombshells in here. It's not the purpose of this book. But I can say that as someone who has very closely followed Blizzard, there were definitely some surprises in here for me. For instance, apparently after Josh Mascara quit Blizzard while developing the original version of Diablo 4, codenamed Hades, which was a very different kind of game, then Blizzard president Mike Morhaime called up Bill Roper and David Brevik and asked them to come take charge of Diablo 4. And apparently they were in talks for months, but ultimately Brevik got a sense of the Activision politics that were creeping in at the time, and he didn't want any part of that. I mean, after all, he had quit Blizzard back in the day because of Blizzard's then owner Vivendi, and Activision was starting to become an even worse corporate overlord. So I know at the time, a lot of us Diablo fans were like telling Blizzard, like, oh, why don't you go get David Brevik, you know, bring back some of the old D2 guys to come and you know, take charge of D4. Apparently they tried. And outside of that, even for information about stuff that we already knew, like Activision's growing influence on Blizzard, the hostile takeover they basically did. The book is just chock full of insight on exactly what was going down. There's some stuff that's debunked in here, including some falsehoods perpetuated by sloppy journalism in the past 2 years. A lot of the Cosby Suite stuff, for instance, is not nearly as bad as the journalists were making it seem. And again, as someone who was mostly aware of a lot of Blizzard's history, I still found this book absolutely enlightening. We all knew that Mike Morhaime left, or we all guessed that Mike Morhaime left because he was tired of fighting Bobby Kotick. But in here, we get actual confirmation of that with more details and specifics than what we were just imagining. You know, we get specific names of Bobby's lieutenants and their political maneuverings within Blizzard. It's almost as riveting as a Game of Thrones plot. And it's also just great to have the full, complete story in one package rather than have, you know, bits and pieces here that you learn over the years. It's comprehensive. Jason has spoken to tons of people, more than 300 current and former Blizzard employees, with a number of direct quotes or otherwise information whose sources are very clear. Again, altogether, I do recommend the book. And outside of that, in an interview with IGN about his book, Jason confirmed that, once again, a StarCraft shooter is in the works. Hopefully this time it'll release. Third time's the charm, right? We had StarCraft Ghost. That one got canceled, and Jason explains exactly why and how that happened in this book. Then there was the unannounced StarCraft shooter title that was in the works that got canceled in order to move talent onto Overwatch and Diablo 4 to get those games released. And now apparently there's a new one. It's a small team. It's a recent development, and it's being led by Dan Hay, who's a veteran Far Cry developer. You look up his LinkedIn, you see that that is true. He came over from Far Cry, and he's been at Blizzard now for, I think it was 2 years maybe. And speaking of StarCraft, Blizzard is releasing StarCraft Remastered and StarCraft 2 on Game Pass in November. StarCraft has always been very special in my heart. I do hope something new StarCraft comes. Then moving on to other news, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom released this week, and it's getting great reviews. On OpenCritic, it has a top critic average score of 87 out of 100, with 91% of critics recommending the game. I'm hearing about some performance issues, but overall, the game seems really fun and charming, although it seems it could get repetitive later on. And that's going to wrap up this week's video, but do be sure to check out last week's video in which we discuss the new villain of Diablo 4. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my supporters. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more gaming content.